fish diversity and human utilization, a happy marriage or conflicting extremes. I think the subtitle here is important. Does anybody know what is happening? I'm outside of my field of comfort here because for the last couple of decades I've been regularly in Africa. I visited some 23 countries, worked in most of them, and I study the fish diversity. But in the meantime, I see all kinds of things happening around me. And these things do not get reported. And that was a frustration, and I started this talk in 2018 in Malawi in the conference of the Pan-African Fish and Fisheries Association. And I just put some ideas into slides and turned it into this kind of lecture. Yeah. So the outline for today, give a little bit information about fish diversity in Africa, not much. I will talk a bit about threats, the many threats that there are. I talk about a kind of very naive Google Earth approach that I used. I talk a little bit about inland fisheries, reports and usually non-reports. That's one of the problems. And I do a little bit of homework, and in between I hope to launch some thought-provoking statements. So normally in this kind of meetings I talk about fish diversity. Today it's completely different. So where do the fish live? Species richness in African inland waters. And you see the brown colors that exemplify where large species diversity are. So in the Great Lakes, in the Congo River, Niger Delta, and some of the lower Guinean rivers, that is where fish species richness is concentrated. And what's the state of these fishes? This is the graph I took from my report now already some years ago, a decade ago, for IUCN. You can look at it from an optimistic or a pessimistic way, but the basic message is that just a bit more than half of the fish are least concern. About 25% or so is threatened, and there's a lot of data deficiency over there. So that gives you an idea about the state of the diversity. Threats, and here I start with my naive Google Earth approach. What you see here is the large Congo River from Kisangani towards Kinshasa. And in 2009 and 2010 we had two large expeditions basically starting in Kinshasa and going down to this area, and then also going into some of the affluents. There are no roads there, so by definition that kind of expedition has to be done by boats. Now there are quite a number of affluents in the area, but this particularly caught my eye because it's a yellow line that is much more pronounced than others. So this is the Aruwimi, and we actually went fishing in that river. So why is this more pronounced in coloration in Google Earth than others? Well, you follow the line, and then you come at a certain point here, and you say, okay, these are the normal waters that I was expecting. And here it's yellow, and it comes from this affluent of the Aruwimi. And if you zoom in on it, you see that these are normal, more or less pristine waters. This is not pristine water anymore. So my guess is a high sediment load, and this high sediment load is not natural, because if you look at the origin of this affluent, and it's in this area, it's a mining area. So definitely, the mining activities here have an effect up to where this river, the Aruwimi, comes into the Congo Basin. And that's just one example of a naive Google Earth approach. So there are some problems. Another example of the naive Google Earth approach is that if you look at Google Earth, and we are still in the Congo Basin, it's normal that you get this whitish spots for large cities like Lubumbashi. But Likasi I've been there, it's not a large city. Kolwezi, not a large city. And still you have those white dots scattered around. So what's happening there? Well, for a project that I had a couple of years ago, I actually visited the site. This is what you actually see if you enlarge Google Earth approach. Also mining activities. A lot of mining activities still ongoing in the area of Likasi and here in the area of Kolwezi. So this is what you see to Google Earth, and if you then go on spot, these are some pictures that I've put together. This is what I call naively, as a fish biology, dead water. There may be some life in it, but it's certainly not fish. And then these rivers where people are working and children are playing in it, they flow further, and then there's some fish coming in, and people eat those fish. Sometimes dead fish are just floating, and people eat these fish. This is actually almost dead because of pollutants, in my observation. So that's one problem, pollution. Pollution by mining industry. I co-signed with a lot of other people, 70 in total. I co-signed this that we published in Science, Oil Extraction in Barrels, Africa, Great Lakes. You can think, are we irresponsible alarmists? Actually, oil production is not happening at this moment in the area of the large lakes, but it is a threat because the only comparison that you have in Africa is the Niger Delta. These are not pictures that I took myself, I took them from internet. Maybe they are exaggerated, maybe not. But then if you look at the Unep report, and I took some phrases out of it, a lot of oil, crude oil, that is spilled in the Niger every year. 8 centimeter layer of refined oil floating on groundwater. Mangrove vegetation is ruined by a bitumen-like substance. Fisheries sector is suffering because of contamination, and fish farms are ruined by an ever-present layer of floating oil. That's happening in the Niger Delta. So what's going to happen if there's oil production in the area of the Great Lakes in Central and Eastern Africa? So I've been in the area of Lake Albert, not in this area where they're already doing some exploratory drilling, but you see it's near the shoreline. So if you have a lot of pollution in the Niger Delta, why do people think that there will not be any pollution if one starts drilling close to a large lake? That's beyond me. So clean oil production in the area of the Great Lakes, really? Is that what's going to happen? And then a large transport of this oil through Uganda to Tanzania, 1,400 and more kilometers of heated pipeline without any problem, without any leak. Really? Is that what they think we believe? What's the problem in the areas? One of the problems is also that you have high residence time and high flushing times in these large lakes, Victoria, Tanganyika, Malawi. Look at these numbers here. Residence time is the mean time of a water molecule to leave the lake, and the flushing time is the total volume, is the mean time in which the total volume is replaced. So if there's any leak in these large lakes, the oil is going to stay there for a long, long time, directly affecting household water facilities, directly affecting fisheries, etc. Okay, going from pollution to something else, the state of the global fish stocks. A slide that I took from Grande. You all are aware of this, with a lot of fully exploited and overexploited stocks. That's for global fish stocks. Do we then know what's happening in Africa? Inland fisheries is the same there. I don't see any reports of this. What you see is sometimes reports for certain areas or fisheries departments that have to produce their yearly reports, but it doesn't get in the peer-reviewed literature. So does anybody know? Well, this is actually very interesting, comes from an interesting paper of Robin Welcome and Liner in 2012. This is the original fish production in tons reported, and he found a way of doing a back calculation which actually shows that there's even more produced than officially reported. It doesn't come as a surprise. What you see is that catches are increasing and are still increasing. All these orange spots indicate countries for which the more than 20% contribution of fish to the animal protein. And what caught my eye is that, first of all, a large concentration in Africa, but everywhere in the world, these spots are in non-landlocked countries. So countries that have access to marine fisheries. In Africa, you have a lot of countries with that kind of percentage that are landlocked, meaning that all their fish have to come from inland waters. So that's enormous pressure. Also, you see the tons of production of these countries, and 95% of inland fisheries catches come from developing countries, and 43% even of low-income countries. And you see African countries belonging to that category. So there's a paradox. There's a report with increasing catch statistics, but occasional scientific studies and anecdotal evidence, and if you go to the field, you see it yourself, that catches are dwindling. And that's also discussed by Welcome and Liner. So what certainly happened is a severe underreporting in the past. So underreporting of the reports that the individual countries forwarded to FAO. That's not a surprise because that has been demonstrated already for marine fisheries by Daniel and others. 9 out of the 18 surveyed African countries, actual catches are estimated to be double than what is reported, or even 400% for 4 out of them, according to a study in 2008. So that's enormous. So even if we think that we, from the official reports, we have an idea of what's going on, it is actually much, much worse. And that refers then to the problem, to the problem of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So why increasing catches then in all these reports? Well, certainly there's a lot more effort in terms of number of fishermen, years, boats, etc. But also maybe that those increasing catches are more apparent than real, because there's better reporting. Not because there are actually larger entities fished. Another phenomenon that may explain why increasing catches are reported is that One of the symptoms of intense fishing is the collapse of particular stocks, even as overall fish production rises. So the perverse effect that when ecosystems go to a less biodiverse state, fish production may actually be larger while biodiversity goes down, at least for some time. I already mentioned that interesting report of Welcome and Limer, what he called an audit of inland fisheries. And here I took his table of the level of confidence of the reports of various countries. So A is acceptable, B some clarification needed, and C there's a large number of problems. And what we see for the major fish producing countries in Africa, only 6 get an A level. All the others B or C, or recently switched from A to B or from A to C. A minor fish production, only a small number of them got an A level. So meaning that those reports, those official catch statistics, are mostly not reliable. And then I did a quick naive survey myself for the statistics. And that's an eye-opener. I'm sorry it hasn't been updated for the latest figures. But look at Botswana. I've absolutely no idea what is happening here. How these figures can go up like this, down like that, and then with a peak like this and then down again. I cannot connect that to a natural phenomenon of fish stocks. South Africa, that was amazing to me. South Africa, plateaus reported like this. So a plateau just means that one assumes that the same amount is caught every year. So if FVO doesn't get reports, then it just assumes that it's the same. So basically this means that even for South Africa, there's no reliability in any of these catch statistics. Same type of plateau for Guinea-Bissau, same type of problem of plateau reporting for Liberia. So actually for those countries, nobody knows what's going on. They have no idea about fluctuation. Ivory Coast, there's a lot of fluctuation going on here. Sierra Leone, almost no catch statistics till 77, then sky high, and then back again to low levels at 2013. Again, I cannot connect this with the natural phenomenon of fish stocks, so something else must explain this. Then you think Mali, okay, this may be some natural fluctuations. And then you look at the composition. Well, except for the fact that in recent years there's one category plus, the whole compartments of the various groups remains the same and has remained the same since 1950. That doesn't look like serious statistics to me. Then are the modern paradigms of marine fisheries, are they also relevant for inland fisheries? So let's start with tragedy of the commons. Don't explain it, most of you know what I'm talking about in layman terms. Get as much as you can while you can. Is that happening in Africa? Looks that this is a typical situation in regions with unlimited and free access to fish resources. And that's for a lot of countries and regions in Africa. It's like that. There is no access limitation. Or when it is regulated, there's no law enforcement, which de facto is the same as unlimited access. There are some signs of improvement around Lake Victoria. They are now regulating what used to be free access, and there are also some co-management efforts in Kenya and Malawi. But these are the exceptions. Another paradigm, the shifting baseline syndrome. Daniel is sitting there. One normalizes whatever surrounds us. This, as an example, the trophy fish caught at Key West, and I may have stolen this example from Daniel, I can't remember. Large fishes caught in 57, this is 1980, and this is the trophies in 2007. This is a typical example of shifting baselines. These were traditionally, let's say, the standard large catch that we have. This is just a small catch, and when people catch fish like this, they now get a trophy. Okay. So is that also happening in Africa? I give one example of a project that I've been doing. I've been living in Malawi between 96 and 99 for a taxonomic study, a World Bank project. So my baseline for Chambo, which is the name for all the local tilapia, was that it was doing well. I must admit I eat a lot of Chambo when I was living in Malawi, and I thought there's a lot of them. So that's my baseline. I was living in Malawi from 96 to 99. But then I found out that my baseline was already incorrect, because look at the tonnage that was caught before 96, up to 17,000 in 82. When I was living in Malawi, it was only a fraction of what has been caught before. So my baseline at that time, while I was thinking there's a lot of Chambo here, that's not correct. I went back to Malawi in 2018. Frankly, that triggered this lecture. I didn't believe my eyes. Chambo species that were listed as endangered in 2004 are now listed as critically endangered in 2018, and one species of Chambo may be extinct already. We looked, during ICN assessment, we looked a bit at the catch statistics for a certain region for Chambo over the period 2006-2016, and declines are up to 94%. 94% in the period from 2006, while already, well, I was living in Malawi in 96, they were already declining. So if you look at that, then my guess is that, what, 1 or 2% from the pristine Chambo stock is still there in Lake Malawi. That's one of the most commercial exploited fisheries groups. Shifting baselines, another example. This is a picture of the actual situation. You see that the food web has simplified and completely changed. So my fear is that since this is now the actual stage, that the current fisheries manager will accept this as a baseline, which is wrong. This was the baseline, not this here. I recently ended a project, high project on Lake Edward, and there were all kinds of aspects, and I was responsible for the fish part of the project. And the hypothesis was that within the Lake Edward system, between Uganda and Congo, that is, the fisheries researchers are under serious anthropogenic stress. That was our hypothesis when we started the project. And the first time that I visited Lake Edward with my colleagues, we observed a lot of large, healthy-looking fishes in the fishing villages. I actually thought I was optimistic. I thought we were wrong in our initial hypothesis. I thought this is still a good fisheries, a healthy fisheries. So my PhD student, Papan, visited Rainer in 2020, and Rainer taught him a lot of good tricks, and then we published this paper together. And these are the major species that are used in Lake Edward. So what Laban did, he applied 4 integrated stock assessment methods for data poor fisheries, because there's not much data available for Lake Edward. The fisheries reference points were estimated for 5 exploited fish species, fish stocks of species, in calculating 11 stocks in Lake Edward, and all stocks had poor status, either collapsed, recruitment impaired, or overfished. So confirming our initial hypothesis of a lot of anthropogenic stress. And this is Lake Edward. Lake Edward, whole Lake Edward is within conservation area, within national parks, with not that many villages and not many people living around there. Still, all stocks that we looked at are collapsed, recruitment impaired, or overfished. Fishing down the food web. This happening in African inland fisheries, globally in freshwater it is. Difficult to say. So that's why I took this slide here to explain a bit that catches initially can go up, while fishing down is happening. Here you see the mean maximum length going down and catches going up. That's because of a change of methodology in fisheries. They actually harvesting a large biomass of smaller fish. Look at the future. I like the idea that is coined by Binet et al. In 2009. Fish for many households in Africa are regarded as a bank in the water. They actually needed to survive in difficult conditions. But if you then are realistic and you see the rapid population growth in Africa at 2.3% annually, would mean that between 2010 and 2030, fish consumption demand, if it can stay at the same level, had to grow by 30%. Projected production is only increased, is only marginal. So how does that fit with 30%? Well, they will need to import more fish from Africa. So 40% towards 34% in 2030. And I don't know whether this is feasible. I've seen a kind of mission statement of the Ugandan Fisheries Department, in which they also put these type of figures for their country. I don't see it happening, so I wonder what's going to happen. If fisheries are dwindling, what about then about aquaculture in Africa? A lot of tropical aquaculture fish originate from Africa, but does Africa benefit from it? Well, if you look at the statistics, this is production in 2016, 2.5% only is produced by African inland aquaculture, so freshwater aquaculture. Most of it in Egypt. What's left then? Nigeria and the rest of Africa. So sub-Saharan Africa produces only 0.8% of the aquaculture. So how this is going to raise substantially to allow Africa to produce much more fish, I'm not sure. Then I'm almost to the end. Back to diversity and fish diversity. This is on the Convention of Biological Diversity, the AISHA biodiversity targets. And it says here, and remember that I did this first time, this lecture in 2018, it says by 2020, all fish, invertebrate stocks, aquatic plants are managed and harvested sustainably, legally, and applying ecosystem-based approaches. so that overfishing is avoided, recovery plans are there, fisheries have no significant adverse impact on threatened species, and the impacts of fisheries on stock species and ecosystems are within ecological limits. So this was last year, 2020. Even with COVID, has somebody seen this happening? I haven't seen this. Okay, so that was it. This was actually my friend in 2009 helping with experimental gill netting, so I hope he and his children will still have fish in the future in Africa. Thank you.